Hello, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome to McDuff and Underdown. David Cranmer, Underdown, kind enough to join me once again for some analysis of the latest and greatest findings we have. I captioned the show today, Revelations from the JFK Disclosures. However, as always, David, anything you want to talk about is good with me. Last time we decided to hang all the problems of the world on the Warburgs, and I thought that was pretty good accomplishment for about 45 minutes. So what should we accomplish today?
Well, I think that what your initial topic was is important and timely, and so I think it's the JFK files releases, and I have not been scouring through all the documents. I've looked at some summaries. I listened to the show that you did with George Webb, where you talked about his findings, but I'm just trying to build off of what I already knew and strengthen connections and networks, and sort of try to understand the characters and networks. One of the things that stays with me is in one of Fletcher Prouty's interviews, he talks about how when analyzing the JFK assassination, it's so critical to have an understanding of the history in the period before, and that if you don't know that, then you don't have a good footing to evaluate the false leads and things like that, and be able to kind of stay on track. So that's my initial analysis and approach.
Well, that fits very neatly with my own, which my instinct was to pull out Doug Valentine's book, The Strength of the Wolf, and yesterday read chapter 17 of that, which gives us a ton of background. And a lot of it has to do with some real, I don't know, triangular relationships, or even quadrangular and quintangular relationships between intelligence agencies, the FBI, the presidency, the Department of Defense, the Department of State, and the mafia in various combinations within itself, the Italian mafia, the Jewish mafia, but all of that congeals and comes together around the JFK assassination, and not to mention the tremendous amount of evidence that the Texas oil guys, Murchison and H.L. Hunt were, if not directly involved, then certainly facilitators of what happened. So I'm feeling like the net is closing around the conspirators, even though all of them are dead by now. The state actors are not dead, and I think we may have a state actor to look to, if not more than one. And I'm talking about, of course, Israel.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to think about the special access programs and the secrecy of the program, and who created it, who was involved in it. Did it change names? Because the assassination group is one of the areas that we're focusing on, which is the Operation 40 group, which was set up by Dulles in, I think, 59, and that was with Nixon as the vice president. Supposedly ran that. I don't have a good sense of whether Nixon was really the operational person or the front man that they used, that everybody knew. But the people that were the operators of that were like William Harvey, and this Operation 40 was financed by Poppy Bush, who was George H.W. Bush, who was working for Dresser Services in Texas. His dad's buddy was the Neil Mallon that was running Dresser, so he worked there. And then just weaving in other characters that are a little bit maybe not focused on by our group, but are so tied, that I try to bring out. Like one of the characters George Webb talks about a lot is this I.B. Hale,
Yeah.
he was a FBI person. He was in the Inter-America program with Rockefeller when the FBI had jurisdiction in Central and South America. He then ends up in Fort Worth, where he's from. He was a football star. He played, this football angle is very important to me because he was best friends with a man named Davey O'Brien. And people that are football fans know that the award for the best college quarterback is still called the Davey O'Brien Trophy. And he was a Heisman winner at Texas Christian in Fort Worth, and he played with I.B. Hale. Now, O'Brien is interesting because he has a career that mirrors Hale's. He was also an FBI agent. He was a pro football player, of course, but he then goes to work for Dresser Services in their security, which is the Neil Mallon, George H.W. Bush group. And
Yeah.
Bush.
Let me stop you though. I want to not get too far
Okay.
ahead of two questions. First of all, I want you to just go back and, for everybody's benefit, to define what you meant by special access program, and who is that? How did that come about? And then let's also define why is Dresser Industries important? Are they performing? Are they an independent oil, wildcatters, or are they working for the big guys, or how do they fit into the big?
They're very similar to the Schlumberger. They're an oil service company, and their product differentiation was that they were able to make connections and seals on oil pipelines and in refineries and whatnot. So they were a construction company that was specialized in the oil services, pipeline construction, refineries. So they would have a relationship with all of the Seven Sisters and Rockefellers, and of course the Royal Dutch Shell has a huge presence in Houston. So that's where that's where I think that is important. As far as the special access program, that is the how I see it is the Alan Dulles focal point system, where he's working outside of the chain of command with programs that are run outside of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the Fletcher Prouty criticism in his interviews, that there's this group, this secret team working outside of the chain of command, and the National Security Council, which is charged by law to be in charge of special operations and activities, is the National Security Council. And the Special Access Program is one of the tools that was used to create a group like a ZR rifle group with Harvey, which was a assassination group. And that's kind of what we're studying with these releases right now, is getting information about the these organizations, who were the characters involved. And the reason why I go to a Jack Crichton and a Davey O'Brien is because Crichton is running the 488 intelligence group, which is partnered in many ways like a JTTF. He's partnered with FBI and local law enforcement. He's the translator for Marina Oswald after the assassination. He's also the financer for Operation 40 with the same Poppy Bush. So, and the reason why Davey O'Brien, just the very next step after he worked at Dresser, he goes to work for H.L. Hunt and the Hunt Oil Company. So now you've got the General Dynamics best friend that went to high school and college with I.B. Hale, who's doing the General Dynamics security. And then you have his best friend that's doing it for Dresser Services and doing it for the Hunts. And what's the common thread of all these? It's Zapata. Zapata Oil is the company that all these characters are involved in. And of course, that was the listening post for the Bay of Pigs, was Zapata, and that was the code name. And they had the, Barbara Bush, planes and everything. So this is that's why I think those characters are really important, because that same, oil service, offshore drilling, Zapata, partnered with, again, the same Neil Mallon, the same Harrimans, Prescott Bush. Um, I I didn't watch this, but Mark Kulak did a show where he was showing a interview where they were talking about the oh God, what's the guy's name? The guy that does all the 9/11 stuff. James Corbett was talking about the Walker family and this
Yeah.
Walker character, and so of course George Herbert Walker is also is the um, Prescott Bush is married to a Walker, so that's the grandpa of George H.W. Bush. So these guys are kind of the same group, and then of course that also ties in with all the old World War II tetraethylene people. I can't read it. Is that the Sweet AF group?
This is General Walker
Oh yeah.
and the murder of President Kennedy, the
Mhm.
extensive new evidence of a radical right conspiracy by Jeffrey Caulfield, MD. It's a huge book. I have it on the shelf, and I've gone through the the index as I usually do, and it's just here for reference. So I've got a lot on General Walker. It's interesting to to uh, to pursue that idea, especially when you consider General Arthur Trudeau as another a player in that. And but let's get back to Dresser for another minute, because until you mentioned Harriman, I wasn't thinking big money. And
Oh
okay,
no.
okay, they can do make some oil rigs, and they can service the oil rigs, and they can sell a lot of stuff to the big oil companies. But why is Dresser going to be spending so much money to run the Bay of Pigs? Uh, I just like to know, is Dresser like a front for all of the Texas oilmen put together, or is it just a couple of guys that
I mean,
happen to
so
be connected? And
the
how is
reasons
Harriman?
why the reason why Dresser pops off as a company to study is one is so Neil Mallon. He was a roommate of Prescott and Bunny Harriman. They were Yale Skull and Bones guys. They were all buddies from college.
Okay,
So there's a very old relationship. And again, this goes back to Columbus Castings in Ohio. This is the Buckeye Steel, where E.H. Harriman is partnering with Frank Harriman, or with Frank Rockefeller and E.H. Harriman, and they get into the explosive. God, I'm trying to think what Frank. They all. I forget the name of um what it was called originally, but the thing that I wanted to mention with Malin, why he's so important too, is because his sister married the first head of the National Science Foundation, and that was Alan Waterman. That was the head of the National Science Foundation. Of course, that was started by Vannevar Bush as sort of the follow along from the MIT Rad Lab that he had been running, which has the Lincoln Lab that we talk about, which is tangible now with the FBI ID Prism program that Daryl Rickey and Bob Malone are working on at Rad Lab, but the I'm sorry, Lincoln Lab. But the other thing that really stands out with Dresser is that was the company that Dick Cheney merged over a quail hunt with Halliburton. If you remember that, between his roles as the Secretary of Defense under Bush, he was in the public sector. He was working for Halliburton, and he had the merger of Halliburton and Dresser. And of course, that was one of the major Iraq reconstruction companies with Paul Bremer running the Iraq reconstruction. So there's a legacy of um, characters that are, and of course, and if people remember, Bremer was the person doing shuttle diplomacy with Kissinger in the early 70s. He was his assistant. He was one of the founders of Kissinger and Associates, which was staked by Warburg Pincus, which we covered last time, was the financier of Kissinger and Associates, in the same building as BlackRock, right, in New York. They're in the same building. So that's why this Dresser is important, because they bring in these skull and bones characters. But I think what the real root of the what they're trying to distance themselves from is the and this is where a lot of my personal stuff comes in, is I think it's the tetraethylene story. I think that Ethyl Corporation was started by General Motors and DuPont, and they partnered with Standard Oil of New Jersey, which had acquired Humble Oil, which was the original um, oil discovery in Texas that made kind of put Texas on the map as a big oil state. And then Standard Oil of New Jersey comes in and acquires Humble Oil, and then they partner with General Motors and DuPont to create tetraethylene, which is used for the aviation fuel, and then famously a Luftwaffe, Stuka dive bomber fuel, which were Curtiss Wright planes from Wright-Patterson, taught them how to do that. So this is all the, GM National Cash Register people, which is where in Dayton, Ohio, and the reason that it, to me is so tangible is Angleton's father had the National Cash Register franchise in Italy, and National Cash Register, which is in Dayton, Ohio, where Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is. That was also where Strobe Talbot's uncle, Harold Talbot, that became a Air Force head of the Air Force, the third. They were on a thing called the Runnymede project, the Dayton project, where they're doing plutonium, and they had Charles Kettering from Delco, who was a National Cash Register person that goes to GM later. They're doing Manhattan Project work in Dayton with people like Strobe Talbot's uncle, who's partnered with his brother-in-law, whose name is Charles Allen Thomas, who was the chief chemist for Monsanto. He was the head of the Tennessee Valley Authority, and then goes on to do the Monsanto chief chemist. And he was also one of the founders of Ethyl Corporation with the same Charles Kettering, who did Delco. Again, so all these corporate espionage kind of activities is why I think, if we're going to focus on Angleton and his career with Gladio and the breaking into Mary Pinochet's room and all the things that are very interesting to people, I like to look at what was he doing before. And he was in the X2 group, the Double Cross, and that was run by his mentor, a guy named Norman Pearson, that was a history professor at Yale. And then a guy named Charles Masterman was the British head of this X2 program. And this was the business espionage. This is the industrial espionage group that the OSS and the SOE were doing to, where I see this getting into the IG Farben patents later. You've defeated Germany, you want the spoils of war. You're not going to outright say that you're, using Holocaust medical data for anything. Nobody wants to touch that. So we're going to launder it, through all these different organizations and, classify it and have all this secrecy with it. And that's what I think, that's where I think the big problem is, because people like the Humble people, General Motors, Ford, DuPont, these were all the, and the Walkers, Harrimans, Bushes, these are the people that were the, Union Bank and Brown Brother Harriman and, working with the Dulles brothers, doing the industrialization of Germany after the Versailles Treaty. So that's why I'm locked into these characters and trying to follow their career arcs so that, you don't get into a food fight over whether James Angleton really is a good guy or a bad guy. And, did he, was he a homosexual, and people focus on that too much. And, I don't know, but that it sure seems like he was a business spy and a industrial espionage person. And he used all kinds of tactics to eliminate competition, weaken competition. And he was, part of that group.
My thing is, I keep thinking he has the Habsburg jaw. Have you ever looked at it that way? I think there may be some connection going way back to the Habsburgs. The whole idea of reconstituting that great empire. We've talked about that in terms of the intermarium idea and all of the Brzezinski in Poland, and the whole idea of those Central European countries that are stuck between Russia and the West, wanting to have their own thing, and the Pope would often be involved in that too. But I do want to point out that when you mentioned the Tennessee Valley Authority, the Tennessee Valley Authority was where the Defense Industrial Security Command was first employed to do security. And it went from there, of course, onward. But so there's a connection between Angleton and the TVA. Do I remember that right?
So the person that was running the TVA was Charles Allen Thomas, and he was a Delco chemist that worked with the people because Delco was acquired by General Motors, and that's Kettering, like the Sloan Kettering Memorial Cancer Hospital too. But he was from Dayton originally, and then he went to Tennessee, and of course that facility was a DuPont, and DuPont was the builder of that. I believe they made the centrifuges, where Chrysler in Detroit, I think, made the centrifuges. There's a lot of different people involved in these super projects, of course. But that was a man named Charles Allen Thomas who was with that connection. So it's a little bit of
It's 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon, kind
but
of.
it's not that far though. That's the problem
Yes.
is because Kettering was in Detroit Aircraft with Henry Ford, Edsel Ford, Alex Dow, and the guy named William Bushnell Stout. Stout became Convair's chief engineer for their missile program when it merged with General Dynamics. And Detroit Aircraft Company in 1931 went bankrupt with Detroit and became Lockheed. They reamalgamated as Lockheed, and it moved to out to Santa Monica. And so it's the same characters over and over again. This is why the parsing out like the Ford people versus the Chrysler people versus the GM people, there's a lot of crossover. And one of the other analysis that I did with trying to work with this Division 5 and kind of figure out that angle is I always loop back to Jack Bugis, who has a very mirrored role to these guys in Detroit. He was the FBI director of the Detroit station, which was Arsenal of Democracy. So it's a key strategic industrial base for the United States in World War II. So he's managing that, and then he gets involved with the Fords and becomes a Ford Motor security head. To me, very mirrored to the I.B. Hale role, where he's doing security and union relations is the brush off story. But is there more to that operation? And of course, Ford was called the Ford Service was the kind of wink wink nod nod. We're the union busting group that is really a enforcement division. So it's so that's why that connection is so strong. It's because Convair, which the Fords had built this Willow Run mile-long factory where they were building the B-24s, and their partner in that was the Fort Worth Convair station. They were doing B-24s down in Fort Worth. So that's why I'm thinking, okay, is Bugis sort of watching the Willow Run and Ypsilanti, during the war, and is I.B. Hale doing sort of the mirrored project with Convair and General Dynamics down in Fort Worth that later becomes the place where the F-111 is built, which is one of the top 5, I would say, motives for getting rid of the Kennedys. I don't know, the F-111 contract, the missiles, surface to air missile projects, stuff like that, NASA, control of those budgets. I mean, that's what Fletcher Prouty talks about, because he talks about how the contracts are constructed where you get the initial contract, but the life cycle of the contract is oftentimes 10x 20x what the initial amount is, and it becomes a huge revenue source.
Cash cow.
Uh,
The always wanted cash cow so that we can all be financiers and kick back and accept the rent payments and just put them into the bank and get another condo in the Riviera. Why not? It's a great life being a rentier, owning the rights to things like patents and wow. Yeah, I wish I had invented the Scotch tape. I could
or
read.
post-it note, something good. Yeah,
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
The
Well,
simple stuff.
anyway, I waste my time trying to figure out things like the Kennedy assassination and of course my dad's relation with that. And I really do believe that what I read yesterday uh, indicates that organized crime has been very well known by the elites in this country ever since it started coming in, and I think it's good to remember that it started in New Orleans with the initial Sicilian Italian mobsters being, I think, imported in order to have a gang that you can use to bust unions and to control labor. And I see the same thing happening when you mention these people like Bugas and these guys that are ex FBI, but well versed in the existence of national crime uh, syndicates and mafia organizations, and the same thing with the elite corporations. They know all about it too, and it's kind of like the the story of the old robber barons in Italy that they welcome the traveler into their castle and they feed them beautiful food and they entertain them and they have a very very good time, and then the next when they leave the next night, then the same barons will put on their disguises and ride their horses out there and hold them up and take all their money. um, that kind of that kind of corp big front corporations having an under the table association with organized criminal crime and Murder Incorporated is the old way. It's the European way. It's the empire. And this is my point is to the extent that we ignore the vast amount of organized crime that has been effective, had a lot to do with the death of President Kennedy and so many other horrible things that are going on right now. That if we just try to parse it out as between the Republicans and the Democrats, we're wasting our energy and missing the focus. So I think bringing back the idea of, yeah, the elites maintain power however necessary. And one of the things that they've always found necessary is to have some underworld guys that are going to take care of difficult people and just kind of get them out of the way. So, that kind of motivation might very well be behind the decision, whoever the ultimate decider was, to pull the trigger on JFK. Um, but we also have our friend George Webb uh, has stated very vehemently that it has to do with the Israeli effort to get and create the nuclear bomb. What would you say about the idea that if you look for the ultimate person that said, pull the trigger, that it would have been somebody from the Israeli government?
I, I mean, I definitely look at those things. The Willow Run is another case where that is a tangible, because the Kaiser Fraser auto company that helps industrialize Israel in 1948, which is the old Willow Run factory, and again Henry Kaiser coming from California, moving to or sending his son Edgar to Ann Arbor to run this thing. They go to the Netherlands, they go down to Argentina, and they go to Israel, and they help them industrialize in their time of need. The person that negotiated that deal was a man named Ephraim Ilyin. He also negotiated with Jan Masaryk with the Czechoslovakians to get war surplus. So you have the same man who's working with the Marcus Seif, who is the head of the procurement and the he's the quartermaster of the IDF, is this Marks and Spencer department store tycoon from London, who happens to have a woman named Flora Solomon, who's the guru working there, and she's the one that happens to meet Chaim Weizmann she was at the Weizmann Institute in Israel, and she told Victor Rothschild about the Guy Burgess being a spy. So this is in the story of the Cambridge Five and Angleton and all this stuff, these Weizmann Institute, because remember too, Weizmann Institute was the place where Fritz Haber was originally hired, who's the father of chlorine gases, working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which was financed by Max Warburg. Don't want to say that because IG Farben comes in later when his protege, Helmar Schlecht, finances the IG Farben. So you have those sort of two, very conflicting problems, because Haber, as a, Jewish man, is problematic that he's a Zyklon B, founder, one of the founding fathers of Zyklon B. And how can you
never knew he was Jewish. Wow.
Oh yeah, that's why these things. He's meeting with Chaim Weizmann, who had done the acetone for international chemical industries in Britain, and those patents went to Terre Haute, Indiana, to the Commercial Solvents Corporation, where our friend William Patrick III, who is the bioweaponeer of the stars with Stephen Hatfield and anthrax, and going into test out weapons of mass destruction for the Iraq. He started his career in Terre Haute, Indiana. So that was, and those things I hate, because that's where Bill Harvey's from. His mom was a teacher at Indiana State. I've got my Indiana State letter sweater right here for my grandma, the captain of the 1937 Indiana State basketball team, which is, of course, where our friend John Wooden was the coach and Larry Bird played. And it's also where Jamal Khashoggi, of all places in the world, thought, hey, I'm going to Terre Haute, Indiana, to go to Indiana State next to the Wabash River, and I'm going to become a grad student there. That's odd. Isn't your family friends with the same king of Saudi Arabia that was meeting with Harold Icks and St. John Philby and, doing the Aramco deal and all that stuff? Why'd you go to Indiana State? Well, I think it's because Chaim Weizmann puts the commercial solvents, which happens to be right next to the Vigo Ordnance Factory, where they do anthrax bomblets, botulism bomblets. They sell them to, Churchill. So that's and also who's renting space in Vigo Ordnance Factory? Delco Radio, Charles Kettering, Edward Deeds, Charles Allen Thomas from Dayton. And of course, Delco at this point is a General Motors subsidiary. So GM is basically in there also. So now you've got Alfred Sloan, Engel, and this is post the breakup of John Jacob Raskob and Pierre DuPont. And now you have sort of Alfred Sloan as sort of the celebrity owner. And then Raskob and DuPont then get into the Empire State Building and the Businessman's Plot. If you remember that, they were sort of the leaders of the business.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, it sounds to me like the Businessman's Plot never ended. Maybe they trotted General Butler out to put a cap on it and, put a bow on it, put it on the shelf. It's all over, busted. Franklin Roosevelt got it. But the characters involved are the same. And the idea that that they would start a businessman plot and give up so easily, being who they are, these dynamo executives that can demand whatever they want. is pretty far fetched. So
Hmm.
yeah, the whole idea of the corporate elite having an ongoing desire to run the federal government out of their, breast pockets, uh, you know, is ongoing. That is one of the things that President Kennedy was a danger to them if he had another term.
Well, I just look at what was the fallout. So you have DuPont and GM executives going against Roosevelt. Roosevelt is, of course, with doing the New Deal and has Henry Morgenthau as his Treasury Secretary and has Eric Warburg, the son of Max Warburg, as his financial advisor. So you have these forces that are conflicted, and it sure seems like everybody knows everybody, and Ethel DuPont marries FDR the third, and they kind of have the marriage on the cover of Time magazine, and then DuPont doesn't get dinged hard enough that they don't let them build out Tennessee Valley. That, I mean,
Okay, there you go.
they still got the big contract during the war, so if they were really trying to do the plot, like, they didn't get punished very hard. They didn't slap the hand very hard at all.
Boy, I think we're right on the money with that. And well, the
They didn't want to
tentacles.
be IG Farben of America, and the problem is that you've already got Edsel Ford and you've got Walter Teagle that are on the board of IG Chemi, which is the international conflict. And then later you have Bobby Kennedy with least or with Stas, the brother-in-law, that are involved with not Engine Charlie Wilson, but Electric Charlie Wilson in the Interhandle case, which is the IG Farben in Switzerland. So I think there is a very, like, one of the things that I think is a really important moment in history was the recognition of Israel with Truman and the group that was sort of fighting over that, and it was Marshall and Forrestal that were kind of like, let's not do this, and then they
Right.
had Clark Clifford was the one that really talked him into it. And Clifford, of course, goes on to um, be the head of BCCI Bank at the end of his career as an old man. So
But
and
he
he
was
also,
he was the lawyer. He wasn't acting on his own. He was acting on behalf of clients, right?
he was the lawyer. I think he might have become the national security advisor later. He
Okay.
definitely had a career in the government, but he was like Truman's very close friend. He was a lawyer. He, excuse me,
Yeah.
he was also the person that Atchison said was the spearheader of Point Four, and Point Four program was the aid program where Bill Casey was the lawyer for them, beginning his career. So that's where when Fletcher Prouty says the William Casey secret team, remember that Casey was at one point in his career was working for Clark Clifford as a young lawyer in the Point Four program, which was an international aid program affiliated with Nelson Rockefeller's Inter America program, where they were going to provide aid and get into the Central America. And then you later, of course, have the PB successes and the overthrows in Guatemala and all of the actions with under the Eisenhower administration with Dulles and Bissell and kind of the secret team guys, that you read about. You've got the Shackleys and Hellowells, and the Charles Cabal is setting up the air routes for the civil air transport. So yeah, I mean, to me, that's the nexus of the group, and just trying to link it all together is and really try to figure out, because I know this having a nuclear bomb was promoted as such a priority and became the big conflict for Kennedy and Ben Gurion. But the thing I think is also important to remember is that the AMF Atomics is the company the American company, which people think of as a bowling pin, bowling
Yeah, bowling
company.
balls.
Well, they also happen to build nuclear facilities, and they hired um, they hired a guy named Walter Beadle Smith to be the vice president. And Walter Beadle Smith, who had been the deputy to Eisenhower during World War II and was the worked with Harriman when he was the ambassador to Russia, he goes on to be the second CIA director as well. And he's the one that, AMF Atomics built the Dimona and Negev nuclear facilities. And that's AMF is the one that Eisenhower says when he says the military industrial complex, he lists AMF as the company. And so you have the CIA director, who's hiring Angleton. I know Angleton gets the credit for, clipping the orchids in the desert and, making the desert bloom and all that stuff. But again, is he you said that, what did Doug Valentine say that, Harvey's boss was
Shaq,
Bissell, Richard
Shaq.
Bissell?
Right. No.
Mhm.
Harvey talked to Bissell on a private telephone line many times, accordingly. So, but in between them in the chain of command is still Shackley, who was the head of Operation 40.
And Shackley was worked under King Harvey and in the Berlin station. He was from Florida and he was a Polish speaker, so he would have language skills that would be
Right.
valuable. And then he, of course, becomes the deputy CIA director under Poppy Bush in '76, and he's doing all the secret team activity stuff. And I do believe he is the mentor to Cofer Black. And my reason that I say that is the Carlos the Jackal tracking. They both were Carlos the Jackal people. And if you remember Ed Wilson and Frank Turple, when they go to Libya to sell the C4 to Muammar Gaddafi for the bombings everywhere, that was the Shackley that told Ed Wilson to go there, and then later Cofer Black comes in and tracks down Carlos the Jackal. So it seems like he's kind of just the continuation from that. And of course, Wilson had been in Task Force 157, which was the Navy signal comms that did Kissinger's trip to China. And then he gets involved in all these, off book dealings that then sort of rolls into what becomes the Western Goals, Singlaub, Oliver North, like the Iran Contra group, same people. They just like name it different. They call it Safari Club and BCCI, and then it becomes Iran Contra. But it's again same characters over and over again.
Well, let's go back and consider the new revelations that we've been hearing about. I haven't read them. I haven't scoured them. I'm kind of waiting for other folks to do that so I can do the cherry picking and get to the good stuff right away. Of course, I've been busy doing my own work too. So people like George Webb that are going to dig into this stuff, I really appreciate, and all the other ones too. What else in these revelations do you think we should bring to people's attention, David?
I think that what the things that you are doing as far as just fact checking the Torbett memo and being like, here's a document that's scrutinized and people fight over, is it right? Is it wrong? So try to use the new documents to support and get, either strengthen an argument or just, weaken an argument and sort of filter through all that. And that's, because if you go to like the Torbett memo, they talk a lot about the Division 5 as part of their theory. They talk about Perm Index in there. And then another one that I think is really important is World Wildlife Fund, because that has so many of the important characters. It's got, the, Prince Philip and Prince Bernard and Julian Huxley, and you've got the Winthrop Rockefeller, who's the Bell helicopter pilot that's, flying on, landing his helicopter on the tennis court on Gibson Island, where he's the head of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation or whatever. And this is where the, that, your group and everybody has done so much on the Gibson Island stuff with that tech transfer, but that's a DuPont stronghold. That's Symington, who was the Secretary of the Air Force before Talbot. But you have that, and then the person that set up those conferences, who was Neil Gordon, he was at Hopkins when that, but then he comes to Wayne State, Michigan, or to Detroit, to Wayne State, and then he sets up the library there, and then he dies. He goes flying out of the window in Detroit, I think 5 days before Angleton, or not Angleton, the Forrestal. So that's another.
Who is it?
intriguing-
Who
But
was it that did the latest jump from the?
Neil Gordon. So the Gordon Research Conferences is the name of the Gibson Island conference.
Wow.
So
we did that work, David,
Yeah.
I think 6 years ago now, in 2019, before COVID, and continuing afterwards. But yeah, that, and remember, when I was doing the booking for the charrette that we did at that time, and I wanted to make sure that we got as close as we could to Gibson Island. It's a gated island. You can't get on it unless you have a pass or something. So we had engaged a boat, a tour boat out of Annapolis, and we talked about where we were going to go, and I told them, well, we want to go over to the Chester River. We want to see the Rascom estate where the Russian spies lived, and we want to go and cruise around Gibson Island. And the next thing I knew, I got a phone call that said that they had decided to take that weekend off and won't be doing any tours that weekend.
Oh no, Bob Mueller's family doesn't still have a house there, do they? I thought his dad had beat all the DuPont in sail races in the 50s. So are they still there now?
Well, Toto is very angry about this whole thing, and she should be.
Well, she should be. But again, like, the reason why I can remember this clear as day is because Neil Gordon, who was the founder of this, when he started the Kresge Hooker Library, which is a library that is a old collection of books in medical, but it's really the crystallization of sugar. This Hooker had been he'd been the chief chemist for the Philadelphia Sugar Company, so he was doing beet sugar crystallization. So again, like, people that are more into chemistry and industrial processes, I'm sure there's a very valuable cross use for crystallization of sugar or whatever. But that was there. But the person that was helped Gordon do that was a man named Harvey Merker, and that he was the chief chemist of Park Davis Pharmaceutical in Detroit, and he was the person that fixed up my mom and dad. He was a very close friend with my grandma, Jeanette Cranmer, and that my dad was the paper boy, and he lived next to Charles Coughlin on Lakeside, and was one of my dad's paper boy clients in Birmingham, Michigan. So that's why I can remember these things. And then, of course, the horror of the fact that AZT is developed at Wayne State, Michigan. At Wayne State is where AZT was synthesized, and it's basically on the campus of General Motors. I mean, it's in the new center of Detroit. So and then also Park Davis also has the horrible reality of being in the mural of industry, the Diego Rivera courtyard that he does at the Detroit Institute of Art. They have the vaccine baby, the Magi scene in that thing. And again, like, I hope that Dr. Merker isn't the one that was featured in that. But of course, it was Edsel Ford that sponsored that at the DIA, and the person that discovered Rivera was Dwight Morrow, who was the father of Ann Morrow, the father-in-law of Charles Lindbergh, who's also the person that financed. He was a J.P. Morgan banker, and he's the one that got Henry Luce going. He was a Skull and Bones guy at Yale with like Luce, and so he got his J.P. Morgan people to sponsor Time magazine, for a young journalist, um, Henry Luce.
Henry
And
Luce.
Henry Luce was a missionary. His dad started the Yale in China program, and he was his patron was the Fowler McCormick, Hattie Fowler McCormick from Chicago. Her son was the third person on the Rockefeller Foundation. He married, John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s sister. So, and they're, old University of Chicago people. So this is where the University of Chicago, the pile, the first nuclear chain reaction, and then having people like Leo Slazard, go off to the Salk Institute after that. He had come from University of Chicago, and then also the people like Hermann Joseph Muller ends up in Bloomington bringing James Watson. He had been working on the Pile Manhattan Project. So all these characters are like the family like connection. So that's why I can remember them. But again, it's like, I mean, like AMF Atomics, again, they also did the Breaking Away movie in Bloomington, Indiana, about the Little 500 race.
Oh,
And it's
I
about,
love that movie.
yeah, rewatch. My grandparents were extras in it, and that's where Miss Barry, my grandparents' friend, she was heartbroken because they bulldozed her house, but they filmed a lot of it at the Tridelt house. She, she's the one whose brother-in-law was the great Harvard legal scholar that we've talked about before, that also was from Omaha, Nebraska, that was family friends with what's his name, Warren Buffett's longtime partner, Charlie Munger. We've talked about it before. I have to look up his name. It's not. He was like he was the dean of Harvard's law school in like the 20s and 30s, and I can't think. It's not.
It's not Dean Pound, is it?
Yeah, Pound. So there's Ezra Pound, and then there's
Roscoe Pound.
Roscoe Pound. So Miss Barry's sister married Roscoe Pound. So that's why when Dr. Oppel shows up on the doorstep, and my grandparents are living next to Hermann Joseph Muller, and the Alfred Kinsey lives 3 houses away, and the discoverer of Crest toothpaste, that's the head of the chemistry department, is across the way, and like all these things. And then like Bill Harvey had been a law student there, all this stuff. Like that's why I'm like, there's a lot of this, like so much of this stuff where it's just like, why is everybody around? It's just like overwhelming. But that's the
they're everywhere, but only people like you see it, David.
Well, I don't think that a lot of the people even know. Like I was telling you, like in my homeroom in my high school, you meet for the first 5 minutes to check in or whatever, do attendance. And like I had the granddaughters of the Lionel Train owner. And of course, Lionel Train was started by Roy Cohn's uncle. Roy Cohn bought it with Santos Traficante in the 50s or 60s or whatever. And then they bought it. Their grandpa was the first employee for, Al Taubman. Alfred Taubman was the mentor to Les Wexner. Like the Jack Bugis we talked about. After he left Ford, he works for Max Fisher. Max Fisher was the Julius Klein protege. Klein's the one that set up the Jewish war thing that Roy Cohn and Louis Rosenstiel were doing all their recruiting from. So it's like a very tight connection of people. And like the other one that is just like that I don't know. So that's why like I have been trying to do like grok to just like fact, just to sort of like strengthen arguments or whatnot. But
are you doing the one on X, or did you go to the standalone one? Because I understand there's a big difference.
I've never used the standalone. I just use the one that's in the Twitter feed.
I just don't trust that one. I
tried it gets stuff wrong, and it's the thing that I keep struggling with it is that it says there's no evidence to support this when I say something, And then rather than just doing a simple search with the words that I use, where they'll find endless examples of that being factually correct, it will instead say there's no supporting evidence, and it will end it saying what you said is incorrect. And then you have to go through the process of like, well, okay, now I'm going to re-enter it. Okay, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. And it just keeps doing it over and over again. But it ruins the flow, and you only get 15 searches per 2 hours. So you end up wasting many of your searches just correcting information. It's just basic, Wikipedia facts that they say there's no evidence. There's no evidence of this. And it's like, did you even look, or you just say that? It's
phrasing it like that, and we have to wrap up the show, but to phrase it like that, there's no evidence. It sounds so much like the work I've been doing on the virus vaccine, Lyme disease problem with Adam Finnegan and others. And it's the problem of evidence-based medicine. And that is, if you come in with some complaints and they're chronic and really troubling you, and it's infecting your life, and so you've gone to get some treatment, but they give you a test for something, and the test comes back negative, and then they say, well, there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, how do they know there's nothing wrong with you just because one test or one battery of tests came back negative? Well, that's because the insurance companies don't want to pay for any more tests, and they're done with you. And you can go and take a hike as far as they're concerned. And we're doing what I hear, it's just resounding idea of if you can't prove it yourself, you're not going to learn it from us. Yeah. And so that's why we work so hard at what we do, David. I am still gathering evidence too, but to me, it's the robber baron thing. It's all of these people that have somehow been born into or given access to, probably under blackmail, to being part of the empire. You can be a baron, or you can be a duke if you make enough money, but then you get to interact with all these people on a level like what I guess it's the Bilderbergs, where they say you can, whatever you say in there, you can say whatever you want, but it can never be talked about outside, and you can't attribute it to anybody.
Chatham House rule is the name of it.
And so it's like, to paraphrase George Carlin, there is an empire, and you're not in it. Yeah. And you're better off not in it, because once you're in it, man, you better not step out of line, or it's
Yeah.
So you've been so close to it, but to really know all of the inside stuff, you almost have to be a part of it. And who wants to do that? Not me.
Well, like I said, I just one thing that I do want to say too, with the grok, that I think is also a huge problem with it for users, and to be aware of this, it does not retain previous conversations. So there's a huge deflation of like your drive to use it, because all of the work you do to build something up and build all these connections have it recognizes. It wipes the slate clean every time. It says we're not authorized to scrape data for user privacy. We can't search. We can't do this. We can't read this. And how a truth-seeking engine could have, we're not going to constantly improve, harvest the work we've done, what we've built, like grow together. Instead, it's no, we're concerned about privacy issues. We're going to just wipe it clean. You're going to have to re-enter the same things over and over and over again. And I'm just going to apologize. Gee, I missed it. I said there was no evidence, but you're right. We talked about this, all last week. So whoever's doing that, I feel like that is something that could really improve it. But again, is it truth seeking, or is it meant to be a frustrating user experience?
I think the latter, David.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, if you want to know who really killed John F. Kennedy, just ask Grok. They'll tell you right away, or maybe not.
I think Grok would say Lee Harvey. Wouldn't it say experts at the Warren Commission said
Oh yeah,
that
this
exclusive?
yeah the Warren Commission said so, and there is no evidence that they were wrong.
No evidence. Yeah. And well, they yeah. There's always so much to go on all these, all these. I mean, I'm thinking about Connolly right now, with the magic bullet, with his
Uh,
daughter being killed, with being the lawyer for Clint Murchison and Sid Richardson. He became the
with his daughter
Treasury.
being killed, according to George, by one of the Hales, right?
He was married to her. They
Oh,
eloped. They were
oh, that
teenagers that got married, and they
murder.
grew up
Okay,
in Fort Worth or whatever, and then they went to Florida. And
yeah.
like 10 days after they were married, she discharged a shotgun behind her head and killed herself. And he didn't even spend a night in jail. And then he, goes on to rob or set up wiretaps in Judith Exner's house in Santa Monica, and you know,
This is what Doug Valentine was calling the $1 million man. You know that if you're Johnny Roselli, then you don't get prosecuted for anything because why? Because national security. You maybe one time in your life carried a suitcase from here to there for the CIA, and now everything you do forever is now sealed, and you'll never be prosecuted for anything because you are $1 million man. And you know, folks, we got to recognize that there is an empire. We're not part of it, and this empire doesn't care a damn about whether you or I or anybody else is alive or dead. It's all about fulfilling their missions and uh, keeping that money going, flowing up to the top of the pyramid. Who's sitting at the top of the pyramid? We don't know yet. Maybe it's just an oligarchy of certain very powerful people at the heads of the corporations and the families, but maybe there, there. It's like, is there a Satan? Well, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but there's a lot of evidence that satanic stuff happens, and we just have to assume, that we are not wrong when our instincts tell us, hey, there is an organized conspiracy to control the world. It's old, it's very well financed. It uses puppets, it uses politicians, it uses mafia, it uses psychologists, it uses everything it can to grab its arms around the entire world and milk it for its own gain. That's the way it is, if you ask me. Am I right?
I I see it as just chaos. Like I mean, the chaos theory of creating so many. Like I see the Steve Bannon technique, the flood the zone. That's my analysis. They just put so many things out there, and they're so good at doing the sensory triggers where you get excited with the noises and sounds and lights and all that stuff, and so you just have all these things going on all the time, and that's what I think the real strategy is, and that's why like sorting through and building a filter where you can easily dismiss bad leads and not waste time or try to build off of bad stuff. And so it takes a lot of um, work and working with a group of people to you know sort it all out. But that's what I see, is that it's just a mass confusion project. And really, I don't think there really is anybody that has their hands around all of it. I think that it's just meant to create um, a destabilized footing for most people so that you're able to get things passed and convince people to agree with things they normally wouldn't, because they're constantly in a state of frustration, or that it's just they don't want to spend the time on it, just get it over with, and let them do it, and I'm just going to do my own thing. That's what I think is the very effective strategy for the majority of um, people. And of course, there are very specific things that happen that we're trying to talk about, but overall, I think that's what the information is just to make it polarizing and confusing.
Cognitive dissonance is their goal. Keep us like deer caught in the headlights, don't know whether to run, fight, or flight. We're stuck, and that's where the psychology, the psychiatry that's been applied to us, and the mass formation psychoses. Absolutely. Well, David, it's been another hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't solve the gunmen, but I feel like hopefully the list of contenders has been whittled down a little bit.
Yeah, and the interest, the immediate vested interest. Somebody said, "Let this happen." I don't know how to find out who it was that let it happen. Whether it was, a lot of people allowed it to happen, but somebody had to say in the first place, "Let it happen," and then it happened. Well, I'm going to keep on the case. I know you are. And David Kramer, Underdown, it's always a pleasure. Have a great afternoon, and say hi to Bo for us.
I've got him right here. He got a haircut, so he's looking a little bit slimmer than
very good though. He didn't bark at all. What a good boy.
He was great. He's been doing great, and he had some health problems, and sadly the health problems that George described in his show is very paralleled with what I'm going through, and it's hard for me. And he's been great for about a month now, but it's the the mRNA lifetime solution is that's the One Health program. We've talked about this. It's Global Virome project out of UC Davis, and this is all the the COVID-19 characters. That's that, and so that's I just want him to be healthy, and but it's all these are the things that like weigh on me a lot is his condition and how to best handle it, because again it's I'm the expert. I went to Iowa State's veterinarian school, which is the top in the world, and so what I'm telling you is that as the expert, and I'm just I just want Bo to be healthy. I want him to be able to walk. So it's just hard.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought he was getting better.
No, he's doing good now, but it's just that you don't know. I mean, because she said things like, well, if you don't give him the medicine, he's going to get it. It's going to come back 10 times worse. And then she goes on about, also there's another vaccine you should take, because there's this, I don't even know what it was called. It's like, it's the most painful death that an animal can have. And we've seen it. And I'm like, why, and I'm like sitting there with my mom, who's like very much trusts everything the expert says.
Oh no.
And I'm just like, don't put that out there. Like, it's just because now she is worried about it all the time. And again, like, I don't know. I'm just trying to watch him and give him a good diet and make sure everything is, that he's getting around okay. I don't sense that his joints are problematic again. And it's just like, but all this stuff has been introduced now, and it's like, I don't want to, I have so much empathy for people that have to have these health struggles and deal with the way the medicine is, because it's just a terrible system, and it's a flood zone strategy. You just give everybody has their own brand of something to worry about, and it's just it's the stuff that affects you the most.
It sure does when it comes to our beloved dogs and cats and pets. Well, we all wish Bo a continued recovery, and give him a big hug.
I think that he's going to be healthy, and but again, Mark does these shows about the number one cause of death in an animal or a dog is now cancer for a dog. So, and again, it's like, are you going to do the immune suppression because his joints are being attacked and you need to suppress the immunity and offer these things. It's like, okay, this sounds exactly like the sleeper agent stuff you're talking about, only for a dog, where you're going to, lower immunity and, oh gosh, something else came
Absolutely,
up
yeah.
now. So it's just a cycle. And I dealt with this psychologically when my grandma was in the nursing home, because she used to get C. diff all the time. And the C. diff is it's when your gut bacteria, you have to go on the antibiotics, and then you get the to get rid of it, and then you just go through this cycle. But of course, it's just a constant diarrhea. So the person is just physically ruined from it, because you're just constantly, and so it's the balance of, okay, so do you give this much medicine versus that? It's just awful, because you just want your loved one to be comfortable.
Diet, exercise, sunshine, maintain circadian rhythm, and maybe take some anti-parasiticals. My experience has been miraculous in not going along with the experts, advice, and a lot of people are doing the same. I'm glad, so glad that you've got the perspective to say no, and the confusion, between you and your mother, and worrying about the dog all the time.
Oh yeah.
I'm so sorry for that.
And if something happens to him, and then it'll be like, well, David, you were a bad, you
Oh
made
no.
a bad decision. You went outside the boundaries, and so this is why it's so layered, as far as the it's just hot. I mean, it's like, if you wanted to war game the way to hurt me the most, this is what you would do.
Oh, mm, mm, mm. Well, David, thank you so much. We love you. We love Bo, and we wish everybody the best. And things like this maybe will help somebody in the future to say no, to stand up and say no. This whole mRNA thing just doesn't make any sense to me. Well, we've run out of time, David. Thank you so
Okay,
much again.
bye.
Thanks everybody for being with us. Tomorrow it'll be me and Marcia for our Friday live chat. I hope you can join us then. Bye now.